9 times out of 10, you'd probably pick the country with the reigning Ballon d'Or winner and the best young player on the planet as favorites to win the World Cup, especially if that country is an international powerhouse and, oh by the way, won the last World Cup too. But what if that Ballon d'Or winner was ruled out of the tournament less than 48 hours away from their first match? And what if I told you that in the last 20 years, the reigning World Cup champions have only made it beyond the group stage once? It's true, the last 5 consecutive World Cups have seen their defending champs completely implode at worst and severely underperform at best. And with Christopher Nkunku getting injured in training last week and other crucial players from their 2018 team missing, France just might be the next victim of soccer's strangest superstition. Hang on to your Ouija boards as we take a closer look at the curse of the World Cup. Welcome back to the channel, guys. You're watching the Sideline Starters, and I'm Andy, first team all sideline. Don't forget to drop a like to help the channel grow, and without further ado, let's get started. Our journey starts with a trip back in time to 1998, when France won the World Cup on home soil, beating Brazil 3-0. The final was most memorable for Ronaldo's pre-game seizure and the speculation of whether or not he would play. R9 wound up suiting up, but was no match for one of the most balanced national teams of all time. Before keepers like Ederson and Alisson made on-ball ability trendy, there was Fabien Barthez. The defense also had most capped French player of all time Lilian Thuram, as well as Marcel Desailly and Frank Leboeuf, all capped off by one of the best players to ever breathe, Zinedine Zidane. It was France's first World Cup trophy, which they followed up with a Euro victory 2 years later in Belgium. The Bleu were on pace to dominate world football as Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira entered the fold. But the World Cup curse began in 2002, when the tournament was hosted by Korea and Japan. France lost their leader Zidane to a torn quadricep just before the tournament began, but were still favorites to top their group containing Uruguay, Denmark, and Senegal. But not only did they fail to make it out of the group, they finished in dead last, scoring a grand total of 0 goals in the entire cup, the first time in history that had ever happened to reigning champs. Henry got himself suspended for a game while the rest of the team looked physically exhausted after back-to-back international triumphs. They were simply incomparable to the team that had beaten Brazil just 4 years prior. And speaking of Brazil, while France bowed out at the group stage, Brazil went on to win the whole thing. The 2002 World Cup will always be remembered as Ronaldo's road to redemption, as the legendary forward won the Golden Boot, scoring a staggering 8 times for the South Americans. 2 of those goals came in the final, cementing his status as one of the game's greatest, answering the critics from his 1998 finals loss. And they look set to repeat in 2006 when the tournament was hosted by Germany. Legends Cafu and Roberto Carlos led the defense, with Lucio entering his prime. Ronaldo returned as the country's striker alongside future Ballon d'Or winner Kaká. But the star of the national team was 2005's Ballon d'Or winner and undoubtedly the most cherished footballer of all time, Ronaldinho. Brazil won their group comfortably, benefiting from drawing weaker teams like Australia, Croatia, and Japan, and even bouncing Ghana in the round of 16. Brazil were 4-0 heading into the quarterfinal, but saw their World Cup journey come to an end prematurely, losing to France and Thierry Henry's lone goal in the second half. Now, a quarterfinals appearance is usually seen as a success for most nations, but for the reigning champions, who had 2 Ballon d'Or winners in their starting 11, it was seen as a failure. Brazil, after all, have won the most World Cups, lifting 5 trophies in total, and this was their chance to reiterate their dominance to the world. Their quarterfinal exit saw Carlos Alberto Pereira resign from his position as head coach, and Brazil haven't made it beyond a semi-final ever since. France, the team that beat Brazil in the quarterfinal, made it all the way to the final, where they played Italy. Italy was no stranger to playing France in a cup final, losing to Le Bleu in the Euro 6 years prior, sealing the French double. And the rematch didn't disappoint. Italy and France produced perhaps the most iconic moment in World Cup history: Zinedine Zidane's headbutt on Italian defender Marco Materazzi. The moment of madness saw Zidane sent off in his final game as a professional footballer, forcing the French captain to leave the pitch and the beautiful game in shame. The Italians went on to beat France in the penalty shootout, with the only miss coming from, ironically enough, Juventus star David Trezeguet. This was Italy's first World Cup victory in 24 years, resulting in football's reborn enthusiasm for the art of defending. The country was littered with iconic fullbacks like Gianluca Zambrotta and Fabio Grosso, alongside center halves Nesta and Materazzi, backed by one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time in Gianluigi Buffon. But captain Fabio Cannavaro was recognized as the best player in the world following Italy's win, becoming the first defender in over 20 years to win the FIFA Ballon d'Or. Italy then qualified for South Africa in 2010, but under conflicting pretenses. They were obviously still favorites to top their group containing Paraguay, Slovakia, and New Zealand, but there were some concerns surrounding their squad heading into the tournament. Veteran goal scorers from 2006 had retired from the national team, and most of their iconic defense were in their mid to late 30s, well past the prime of their careers. Out of the 23-man squad, only 3 of Italy's players were under 25 years old, and 9 of them were over 30. And so the World Cup curse struck with a vengeance as Italy failed to win a single game, finishing dead last in what was considered one of the easiest groups in the competition. It was a failure of historic proportions, marking the first time they hadn't reached the knockout stage since 1974. And to make matters even worse, the 4-time World Cup winners were officially knocked out by Slovakia, whose arrival in South Africa was the nation's first appearance in the World Cup ever. And it's a World Cup defeat that the Italians have yet to recover from. Despite their 2020 Euro win, they failed to qualify for Qatar 2022. In retrospect, 2010 saw the demise of an Italian team that was honestly well past its sell-by date. And from the end of an era to the apex of another, let's take a look at the winners from that tournament, La Roja. Now these champions are a little special to me. They're the first World Cup winners that I actively remember watching, and it feels like it was just yesterday. David Villa's heroics all tournament long, Puyol's header versus Germany, and that unbelievable final against the Netherlands were all core memories from when I was a kid. And real quick, in the comment section below, let me know what your favorite World Cup was, or which one you remember the most, and what moment or moments have stayed with you till this day. Back to the video. 2010 was Spain's first ever World Cup victory, and it came off the back of their 2008 Euro triumph, completing the international double with what many consider the greatest national team of all time. They literally had GOAT candidates sprinkled all across the field, man. They had arguably the best keeper of all time between the sticks, the best defensive trio international football has ever seen, the best midfield trio club football has ever seen, and perhaps one of the most underrated strikers of all time leading the line. It was the time of tiki-taka, a possession-based revolution that rewarded close control and positional awareness, continuously exploiting small spaces on the pitch in fluid, uninterrupted motion. A pivot of Sergio Busquets and Xavi Alonso gave Xavi liberty to dictate progressive play, while Iniesta and Pedro played as inverted wingers, mimicking roles found in Guardiola's Barcelona. And Spain continued their dominance after South Africa, outclassing Italy in the Euro final of 2012, smashing them 4-0. And they did it without using a single striker in the starting 11. as Cesc Fabregas played the false 9 role in what has since been coined the 4-6-0 formation. Spanish football had just completed the international triple, sandwiching a World Cup victory in between 2 Euros, and had now set their eyes on Brazil 2014. But the World Cup curse didn't care about any of that and ruined what might have been the greatest international achievement of all time. Holland battered Spain in the opening game of Group B with a final scoreline of 5-1, as Iron Robben torched their defense with help from the Flying Dutchman Robin van Persie. Spain followed this humiliation with another loss to Chile in the next game, failing to score in their 2-0 defeat. They managed to beat Australia 3-0 in the final game of the group, but it was too late. The Spanish Inquisition was over. The Germans had repackaged the possession and patience perfected by Spain and transformed it into something more aggressive, and the results were frightening. When Joachim Löw wasn't eating his own boogers or smelling his own filth, he was actually pretty busy, assembling one of the most prolific national teams in World Cup history. Manuel Neuer, the most audacious sweeper keeper of the 21st century, solidified an already disciplined defense of Jerome Boateng, Mats Hummels, Philipp Lahm, and Benedikt Höwedes. Midfield general Bastian Schweinsteiger would recycle possession from his fullbacks, shielded by destructive ball winners Kramer and Khedira, allowing Toni Kroos to link attacking play as he saw fit. Mesut Ozil and Thomas Muller were listed as wide players on paper but were deployed in much more narrow positions, another nod to their Spanish inspiration. Veteran Miroslav Klose led the line and wound up making history in the most gruesome, most cruel, one-sided semi-final in World Cup history, Germany's 7-1 public beheading of host nation Brazil. Klose broke the record for most goals in the World Cup finals, netting his 16th against the Seleção, while Muller, Kroos, Khedira, and Schürrle all found their way onto the score sheet too. Germany cancelled Messi's day with destiny and snatched the World Cup trophy with a volley from Mario Götze, all in the dying minutes of the final. The rise of Jurgen Klopp, gegenpressing, and Guardiola's Bayern Munich in the years that followed saw German football enter its renaissance period. Philipp Lahm had reincarnated himself as Joshua Kimmich, Goretzka brought power to a younger midfield, and Marco Reus was finally fit enough to play in a World Cup. But at this point you know how the script goes. Germany were a lock to win their group. And cue the World Cup curse. The reigning champions completely bottled it thanks to an Irving Lozano-inspired Mexican victory, and Heung-min Son leading South Korea to a 2-0 win as well. 22-year-old Timo Werner was rendered ineffective, and the decline of Jerome Boateng was upon us. Germany, Spain, Italy, and Brazil had yet to reclaim their place on the top of the football food chain, so by the looks of it, it was time for a new champion. And how fitting is it that we're finishing exactly where we started? France entered Russia in 2018 with a squad talented enough to field 2 national teams. Defenders Rafael Varane and Samuel Umtiti partnered as a duo, supported by Benjamin Pavard and Lucas Hernandez at fullback, with Mandi and Kimpembe to choose from on the bench. Matuidi and N'Golo Kante shielded the back 4 and allowed Paul Pogba to spray long balls, penetrating defenses throughout the knockout stage, with a front line led by hold-up play specialist Olivier Giroud, poacher Antoine Griezmann, and the heir apparent to Messi and Ronaldo, Kylian Mbappe. They blitzed past Argentina in the quarter-final, kept a clean sheet against Suarez and Cavani, ended Belgium's golden generation in the semis, and spoiled Croatia's fairy tale ending in the final. Mbappe was the youngest player since Pelé to score in a World Cup final, as France's youth and depth looked poised to dominate international football for at least one more cup run. Which brings us to present day, where the World Cup curse looks stronger than ever. Christopher Nkunku suffered a tournament-ending injury during France's first week of international training, adding to the laundry list of losses suffered in the months leading to the World Cup. Paul Pogba, N'Golo Kante, Presnel Kimpembe, and Mike Maignan have all been ruled out of the finals, with Rafael Varane questionable after being reduced to tears following a hyperextension against Chelsea, and Karim Benzema picking up a knock in October while playing for Madrid as well. Sharing a group with the tricky Danish side who bested the French in their last meeting doesn't make things any easier. Tunisia and Australia are significantly weaker sides that France should dispose of with relative ease, but we know what happens to reigning champions that are favored to top their group. The pieces are in place for the World Cup curse to add another champion to their collection. Or the French could hire Paul Pogba's witch doctor to cancel out the black magic and finally put an end to 20 years of bad luck. Either way, the World Cup in Qatar will be an absolute spectacle if nothing else. A spectacle of sight, a spectacle of sport, and who knows, maybe even a spectacle of the supernatural. And that's all I got for today, boys. As always, I'm Andy, first team all sideline. Don't forget to comment, subscribe to the channel, and smash that like button if you want more video essays like these. Till next time, boys.